Welcome, time travelers. SolaTales here, and tonight's adventure takes us to a moonlit monastery tower in the 13th century France, where Brother Celestin maps the ancient dance of stars with nothing but brass instruments and boundless patience. So, dim the lights, sit back, and relax. The last bell of Vespers had long since faded into the cool autumn air when Brother Celestin began his familiar ascent to the observatory tower. Each evening, as twilight painted the sky in deepening shades of purple and gold, he would make this journey, 147 stone steps, worn smooth by countless feet over the centuries. The monastery of Saint Benedict stood proud against the rolling hills of the Loire Valley, its limestone walls catching the final rays of sunlight that filtered through the oak groves surrounding the ancient complex. Brother Celestin moved with the measured pace of a man who had climbed these stairs nearly every clear night for the past 18 years. In his weathered hands, he carried a leather satchel containing his most precious possessions: carefully rolled parchments covered with astronomical tables, quills cut from the finest goose feathers, and a small earthenware pot of ink made from crushed oak galls and iron. His brown Benedictine habit rustled softly against the stone walls as he paused at each narrow window to gauge the clarity of the approaching night. The tower itself was a marvel of 12th century engineering, built specifically for the monastery's astronomical pursuits under the patronage of Eleanor of Aquitaine's court. Its octagonal chamber at the summit provided unobstructed views in all directions, with carefully positioned openings that protected the observer from wind while allowing clear sight lines to the celestial sphere. The walls were thick enough to maintain stable temperatures, crucial for the precision instruments housed within. As Brother Celestin reached the top, he set down his satchel and moved to light the single oil lamp that would provide just enough illumination for his record keeping without compromising his night vision. The flame, protected by a specially crafted glass chimney, cast a warm golden circle on the wooden table where his star charts lay waiting. These charts represented decades of meticulous observations, copied and improved upon from the works of Ptolemy, Albatani, and other masters of celestial science, whose knowledge had been preserved in the monastery's extensive library. The brother paused to offer a brief prayer of gratitude for the clear skies, then began the ritual that had become as natural to him as breathing. First, he unrolled his working chart for the current month, October in the year of our Lord 1247, and weighted its corners with small brass instruments. The parchment bore the careful notations of stellar positions, marked in a combination of Latin names inherited from antiquity and Arabic designations learned from the translations that had reached European monasteries through the scholarly networks of Cordoba and Toledo. Outside, the countryside was settling into its evening quiet. The distant lowing of cattle in the monastery's pastures mingled with the gentle whisper of wind through the surrounding forests. Villages scattered across the valley began to twinkle with the warm light of hearth fires, their smoke rising straight up in the still air. This was the hour when the earthly world prepared for rest, while Brother Celestin prepared to engage with the eternal clockwork of the heavens. He arranged his instruments with the reverence of a priest preparing for Mass. The astrolabe, that marvel of brass and precision craftsmanship, held the place of honor at the center of his workspace. This particular instrument had been crafted by Master Ibn Rushd in Toledo and acquired by the monastery through a complex exchange involving rare manuscripts and considerable expense. Its intricate network of rotating disks and engraved scales could map the positions of stars and planets with remarkable accuracy, serving as both calculator and celestial map. Beside the astrolabe lay his quadrant, carved from seasoned oak and fitted with precise brass fittings. This instrument would allow him to measure the altitude of celestial bodies above the horizon with the accuracy essential for maintaining the monastery's growing catalogue of stellar positions. The cross staff, simpler but no less important, would help him gauge angular distances between stars and track the slow movements of the planets against their stellar background. As the last vestiges of twilight faded, Brother Celestin felt the familiar quickening of anticipation that accompanied each night's observations. The work ahead was both meditation and mathematics, combining the spiritual contemplation of God's creation with the practical demands of accurate measurement and calculation. In this tower, suspended between earth and heaven, he served as humanity's patient witness to the grand design that governed all creation. Chapter 1. The Astronomer's Preparation. The transformation from day to night was a gradual symphony that Brother Celestin had learned to read like a musical score. As the western horizon still held a faint amber glow, the first stars began their nightly appearance in the deepening vault above. Venus, the evening star, blazed with steady brilliance in the southwest, serving as his celestial timepiece and the first entry into night's observations. Brother Celestin lifted his astrolabe and aligned its suspension ring with the bright planet, checking the instrument's calibration against this reliable reference point. The weight of the brass felt familiar and comforting in his hands. Nearly 2 pounds of precisely engineered metal that represented centuries of accumulated human knowledge about the movements of the celestial sphere. The ret, the instrument's rotating star map, bore the engraved figures of constellation animals and mythological beings, their forms stylized in the Arabic tradition, but familiar to any student of the sky. The process of stellar observation required not just clear skies, but also the proper frame of mind. Brother Celestin had learned, through years of practice, to empty his thoughts of the day's concerns, the monastery's harvest, the copying work in the scriptorium, the endless administrative details of communal life, and focus entirely on the precise work at hand. This mental discipline was itself a form of prayer, a way of participating in the divine order that governed all things from the smallest grain of sand to the grandest movements of the planets. Tonight's primary task involved continuing his systematic survey of star positions in the constellation Cygnus, the celestial swan that soared high overhead during these October evenings. This work was part of a larger project commissioned by the abbot, creating the most accurate star catalogue yet produced in Western Europe, building upon and correcting the positions recorded in Ptolemy's ancient Almagest, while incorporating the more recent observations of Islamic astronomers like Al-Sufi and Al-Biruni. The methodology was painstaking but reliable. Using his quadrant, Brother Celestin would measure each star's altitude above the horizon at the moment of its culmination, its highest point in the night sky. These measurements, combined with careful timing, using the monastery's water clock and the positions of reference stars, would allow him to calculate celestial coordinates with unprecedented precision. Each observation required multiple measurements to account for atmospheric effects and instrument limitations, with the results carefully recorded in both Roman numerals and the newer Arabic notation system. As he prepared his writing materials, grinding a small amount of fresh ink and testing his best quill on a scrap of parchment, Brother Celestin reflected on the collaborative nature of his work. The observations made here in the Loire Valley would eventually join a growing network of astronomical data being collected at monasteries and schools across Europe. Correspondence with scholars in Paris, Oxford, and Bologna ensured that new discoveries and refined measurements would be shared among all who sought to understand the heavens. The parchment sheets before him bore the accumulated work of many nights. Columns of figures recorded stellar positions with their estimated uncertainties. Notes on observed color variations among different stars, and careful sketches showing the relative positions of close stellar pairs. The margins contained references to classical sources and comments on discrepancies between various authorities. This was scholarship in its purest form. The patient accumulation of accurate observations combined with thoughtful analysis of inherited knowledge. Brother Celestin arranged his oil lamp so that its light would illuminate his writing surface without casting unwanted shadows on his instruments. The flame burned steady and clear, its light sufficient for record keeping, but dim enough to preserve the night vision essential for detecting faint stars. Years of experience had taught him exactly how to balance these competing requirements, creating optimal conditions for both observation and documentation. As full darkness settled over the valley, the sky began to reveal its true splendor. Stars that had been invisible during twilight now emerged in steady procession, each appearing at precisely the moment when the sky's brightness dropped below its threshold of visibility. This nightly revelation never failed to inspire a sense of wonder, even after thousands of hours spent in their company. Each star represented a mystery, distant suns whose true nature remained beyond human comprehension, yet whose positions and movements could be measured and predicted with mathematical precision. The work ahead would continue until the approach of dawn, following rhythms as regular and predictable as the celestial motions themselves. Brother Celestin offered a final prayer for steady hands and clear sight, then turned his attention to the eternal clockwork spinning overhead. Chapter 2. First Light of Stars. The emergence of stars followed an ancient and unchanging pattern that Brother Celestin had memorized through years of careful observation. First came the brilliant beacons, Venus, now declining toward the western horizon, and the brightest fixed stars like Vega, which shone with steady blue-white fire high in the northwest. These luminaries served as the foundation points of his nightly work, reliable reference markers against which the positions of fainter objects could be measured. Brother Celestin began tonight's observations with Deneb, the brightest star in Cygnus and one of the most distant objects visible to the naked eye, though medieval astronomers had no way of knowing its true remoteness. To him, as to all stargazers of his era, Deneb was simply a first magnitude star that marked the tail of the celestial swan. Its position at the apex of what later astronomers would call the summer triangle made it an ideal starting point for mapping the stellar landscape of the northern sky. The astrolabe came alive in his hands as he rotated its rate to match the current star positions. The intricate brass network, pierced with holes that represented individual stars, allowed him to model the entire celestial sphere on a flat surface, a feat of mathematical projection that still struck him as almost miraculous. By aligning the instrument with known stars and reading the graduations on its various scales, he could determine not only the positions of celestial objects, but also the time of night and the season of the year. Each measurement required careful technique. Brother Celestin would hold the astrolabe suspended from its ring, allowing gravity to ensure perfect vertical alignment, then sight through the instrument's rule to the target star. The degree markings on the astrolabe's rim would indicate the star's position in celestial coordinates, which he would then record in his careful script. Multiple readings were essential, as small variations in holding the instrument or slight atmospheric effects could introduce errors into individual measurements. The night air was crisp and still, perfect conditions for astronomical work. Brother Celestin could hear the distant sound of the monastery's night bell marking the hour of compline, reminding him of the parallel rhythms of earthly and celestial time. While his fellow monks prepared for sleep, he was beginning his most productive hours of work. The darkness that others found sleep-inducing sharpened his senses and focused his attention on the subtle details of stellar observation. As his eyes adapted more completely to the darkness, fainter stars became visible throughout the constellation. The swan's neck was marked by a graceful curve of third and fourth magnitude stars, each requiring careful identification and measurement. Brother Celestin consulted his reference charts, noting the Arabic names that had been preserved alongside the Latin designations. Deneb al-Daneb, tail of the hen, for the constellation's brightest star, and Sada, the breast, for the star that marked the center of the celestial bird. The process of stellar identification was itself an exercise in pattern recognition and memory. Each constellation told a story written in points of light, with individual stars serving as the key features of mythological figures that had been recognized since ancient times. Yet Brother Celestin also understood these patterns as practical tools for navigation and timekeeping. Sailors used these same stars to guide their ships across the Mediterranean, while farmers consulted their rising and setting times to determine the proper seasons for planting and harvest. Working methodically from bright to faint, Brother Celestin recorded the positions of 17 stars within the boundaries of Cygnus. Each measurement went through the same careful process: initial sighting with the astrolabe, recording of the raw coordinates, cross-checking against nearby reference stars, and final notation in his observing log. The repetitive nature of this work created a meditative rhythm that helped maintain focus through the long hours of darkness. The monastery's water clock provided the time references necessary for accurate positional astronomy. This ingenious device, maintained by Brother Marcus in the workshop below, used the steady flow of water through calibrated openings to mark the passage of hours and fractions thereof. By timing the exact moments when stars crossed the meridian, the imaginary line running from north to south through the observer's zenith, Brother Celestin could determine their celestial longitude with remarkable precision. As the night progressed, the stellar panorama continued its slow westward rotation. Stars that had been rising in the east when observations began were now climbing towards their highest points, while others that had started the evening high overhead were beginning their descent toward the western horizon. This eternal dance had been proceeding unchanged since the creation of the world, its mathematical regularity serving as evidence of divine design and cosmic harmony. The work demanded not only technical skill, but also physical endurance. Hours spent crouched over instruments in the chill night air tested both concentration and stamina. Brother Celestin had learned to move regularly, warming his hands over the oil lamp flame and flexing stiff fingers before attempting delicate measurements. The cold affected his instruments as well, causing brass components to contract slightly and requiring periodic recalibration against known reference points. Yet these minor discomforts seemed insignificant compared to the privilege of witnessing the night sky in its full glory. In this age, before the artificial lights that would later obscure the stars, the heavens displayed a richness and complexity that filled the observer with awe. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of faint starlight, while meteors occasionally streaked through the darkness like divine messengers carrying news between earthly and celestial realms. Chapter 3: The Great Bear and the Pole Star. As the night deepened and the last traces of twilight faded from the western horizon, Brother Celestin turned his attention to the circumpolar constellations, those stellar patterns that never set below the horizon, but instead rotated around the celestial pole like cosmic clockwork. Chief among these was Ursa Major, the Great Bear, known to the common folk of France as Charles's Wain, after the legendary chariot of Charlemagne. The 7 bright stars that formed the bear's most recognizable asterism, what later ages would call the Big Dipper, served as one of the most important navigational aids available to medieval travelers and astronomers alike. Brother Celestin had long marveled at how these stars, which appeared to wheel around the northern pole of the sky with perfect regularity, could serve as both celestial timepiece and cosmic compass. Tonight, they stood high in the northwest, their familiar pattern as clear and distinct as a church bell, calling the faithful to prayer. Using the 2 pointer stars at the end of the bear's bowl, Brother Celestin aligned his astrolabe toward Polaris, the current pole star. This modestly bright second magnitude star held a position of supreme importance in medieval astronomy, serving as the fixed point around which the entire celestial sphere appeared to rotate. While not perfectly aligned with the true celestial pole, a fact that careful observers like Brother Celestin had noted through precise measurements, Polaris provided a stable reference point that remained essentially motionless, while all other stars traced their nightly circles. The measurement of Polaris's altitude above the horizon was one of the most critical observations an astronomer could make, as it directly indicated the observer's latitude on Earth's surface. Brother Celestin had established through years of careful work that the monastery stood at approximately 47½ degrees north latitude, placing it precisely in the temperate zone described by ancient geographical texts. This knowledge was not merely academic. It provided essential information for calculating the times of sunrise and sunset throughout the year, critical data for maintaining the canonical hours that regulated monastic life. Working with his quadrant, Brother Celestin measured the angular distance between Polaris and several nearby stars, recording the precise relationships that defined this region of the sky. The pole star was surrounded by a family of fainter companions, including the modest constellation of Ursa Minor, the Little Bear, or Lesser Wagon. These stars, while individually unremarkable, gained significance through their proximity to the celestial pole and their role in the grand machinery of stellar motion. The concept of precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that causes the position of the celestial pole to shift gradually over centuries, was known to medieval astronomers through the writings of Hipparchus and Ptolemy, though its physical cause remained mysterious. Brother Celestin had noted in his own observations that certain star positions recorded by ancient authorities showed small but systematic differences from current measurements. These discrepancies, initially puzzling, were gradually being recognized as evidence of this slow celestial drift that would, over the course of millennia, bring different stars to serve as pole markers. The circumpolar stars served as the sky's most reliable chronometer. By noting the orientation of the Great Bear relative to Polaris, an experienced observer could determine the time of night with remarkable accuracy. Brother Celestin had constructed detailed tables showing how the bear's position correlated with the hours, creating a stellar clock that never needed winding and never failed to keep accurate time. This celestial timepiece was particularly valuable during the winter months, when nights were longest and the canonical hours of prayer required precise timing in the pre-dawn darkness. As he worked, Brother Celestin reflected on the profound implications of stellar motion for medieval cosmology. The apparent rotation of the heavens around the earth was seen as evidence of the divine order that governed all creation. The stars moved with mathematical precision because they were guided by divine intelligence, their motions reflecting the harmony that existed at every level of God's creation. This perspective transformed astronomical observation from mere measurement into a form of contemplation, a way of participating intellectually in the cosmic order. The Great Bear's position also served as a seasonal indicator, its changing orientation throughout the year marking the passage of the astronomical seasons with greater precision than any earthly calendar. Medieval farmers who could not read written texts could nonetheless interpret the message written in starlight, using the bear's position to guide their agricultural activities. Brother Celestin maintained correspondence with rural priests who consulted the monastery's astronomical expertise for advice on planting times and seasonal festivals. Working methodically around the pole, Brother Celestin catalogued the positions of all visible stars within 10 degrees of Polaris. This region of the sky, while containing no first magnitude stars other than the pole star itself, was rich in astronomical significance. The area served as a testing ground for observational accuracy, as any errors in measurement would be particularly apparent in this slowly changing stellar landscape, where precise position angles were crucial. The dragon constellation, Draco, wound its serpentine length around the pole like a celestial guardian protecting the axis of the heavens. Its head, marked by a distinctive trapezoid of third magnitude stars, provided additional reference points for positional measurements. Brother Celestin had spent many nights mapping this constellation's extent, noting how its fainter stars created a complex pattern that challenged even experienced observers to trace completely. The work in this region of the sky required particular attention to systematic errors that could accumulate over time. Small mistakes in measuring angles near the pole became magnified when projected onto standard star charts, making careful technique essential. Brother Celestin had developed a rigorous methodology for cross-checking his polar observations, using multiple measurement approaches and always verifying his results against the positions of well-established reference stars. As the night progressed, The rotation of the circumpolar region continued with clockwork precision. Stars that had been to the east of Polaris when observations began were now moving toward their northern culmination, while those that had started in the west were descending toward their lower transit. This eternal dance, proceeding at exactly the rate needed to complete one full rotation every sidereal day, provided tangible evidence of the cosmic order that governed all celestial motions. Chapter 4. Tracking the Wandering Stars. Among all the celestial phenomena that captured Brother Celestin's attention, none proved more fascinating or challenging than the movements of the planets, those wandering stars that moved with mysterious purpose against the fixed background of the constellations. Tonight, Mars glowed with distinctive ruddy light in the constellation Gemini, its position noticeably different from where he had recorded it just a week earlier. This apparent motion, sometimes forward and sometimes backward against the stellar background, had puzzled astronomers since ancient times and remained one of the greatest intellectual challenges of medieval science. Brother Celestin approached planetary observation with the same methodical precision he applied to stellar work, but with the added complexity that planets required careful tracking over extended periods to reveal their true motions. Tonight's observation of Mars would become one point in a long sequence of measurements stretching back over 3 years, each position carefully plotted on a special chart designed to show the planet's wandering path among the stars. Using his astrolabe to measure Mars's position relative to nearby stars in Gemini, Brother Celestin noted that the red planet had moved approximately 2 degrees eastward since his previous observation. This steady progression through the zodiacal constellations was the normal or direct motion that planets displayed most of the time. However, his record showed that Mars had exhibited the puzzling phenomenon of retrograde motion earlier in the year, appearing to reverse direction and move westward against the stars for several weeks before resuming its eastward journey. The explanation for these complex planetary motions lay in the sophisticated geometric models developed by ancient astronomers and refined by Islamic scholars. According to the Ptolemaic system that dominated medieval astronomy, each planet moved on a small circle called an epicycle, while the center of this epicycle traveled along a larger circle called a deferent. This arrangement, while geometrically complex, could account for the observed looping motions of the planets with remarkable mathematical precision. Brother Celestin kept detailed records of all planetary positions, noting not only their coordinates, but also their apparent brightness and color. Mars, true to its martial associations, displayed a distinctly red hue that varied in intensity depending on its distance from Earth. When the planet was at opposition, positioned opposite the Sun in Earth's sky, it appeared largest and brightest, while at conjunction, when it passed behind the Sun, it disappeared entirely for several weeks. The monastery's library contained several treatises on planetary theory, including translated works by al-Battani, al-Kindi, and other Islamic astronomers, whose careful observations had improved upon ancient Greek models. Brother Celestin regularly consulted these texts, comparing his own measurements with the predictions of various theoretical systems. The slight discrepancies he discovered between observation and theory were carefully noted, contributing to the gradual refinement of astronomical knowledge that characterized medieval scholarship. Venus, The brilliant evening star that had dominated the western sky during twilight was now approaching the horizon and would soon set. Brother Celestin made careful note of its position relative to the stars of Libra, adding another data point to his ongoing study of the planet's synodic cycle. Venus displayed the most extreme variations in brightness of any planet, appearing as a brilliant beacon when well positioned but disappearing entirely during its passages in front of and behind the Sun. The challenge of planetary astronomy extended beyond mere position measurement to include the complex calculations required to predict future positions. Brother Celestin maintained elaborate tables showing the mean motions of all visible planets, derived from centuries of accumulated observations. These tables, originally developed by Ptolemy and refined by successive generations of astronomers, allowed him to calculate approximate planetary positions for any date, past or future, though achieving high accuracy required careful attention to the various correction terms and anomalies that affected each planet's motion. Jupiter, though not visible tonight, had been the subject of extensive observation during the previous months when it dominated the evening sky. Brother Celestin's records showed how the giant planet moved with stately dignity through the constellation Pisces, completing its journey around the zodiac in approximately 12 years. This regular period made Jupiter particularly valuable for long-term chronological calculations, as its position could serve as a celestial marker for dating historical events. The astrological implications of planetary positions, while not Brother Celestin's primary concern, could not be entirely ignored in medieval astronomy. The Church's position on astrology was complex and somewhat ambivalent, generally condemning judicial astrology, the prediction of individual fates, while accepting natural astrology's broader correlations between celestial and terrestrial phenomena. Brother Celestin focused his attention on the mathematical aspects of planetary motion, leaving questions of terrestrial influence to more theologically trained scholars. Saturn, the most distant planet visible to the naked eye, moved with almost imperceptible slowness against the stellar background, taking nearly 30 years to complete one circuit of the zodiac. Brother Celestin's observational records for Saturn stretched back to his earliest years at the monastery, documenting the planet's gradual progression through constellation after constellation. The planet's extreme slowness made it particularly challenging to observe, as its motion was barely detectable from night to night and required months of careful measurement to establish with certainty. The mathematical tools required for planetary astronomy were among the most sophisticated available to medieval scholars. Brother Celestin employed trigonometric tables, originally developed by Islamic mathematicians, to calculate the complex geometric relationships involved in planetary theory. These calculations, performed with Roman numerals and geometric constructions, required careful attention to detail and extensive checking to avoid computational errors. As Mars continued its eastward journey through Gemini, Brother Celestin completed his measurements and turned his attention to recording the night's planetary observations. The data would join the growing archive of positional measurements that, accumulated over decades, would contribute to humanity's gradually improving understanding of planetary motion. Each observation, however small, added to the great collaborative effort of medieval astronomy to map and predict the movements of the celestial wanderers. The work of planetary observation connected Brother Celestin to a tradition stretching back to Babylonian astronomers who had first recognized the periodic nature of planetary motions. Their patient observations, preserved and transmitted through Greek, Islamic, and Latin texts, provided the foundation upon which medieval astronomers continued to build. In his tower above the Loire Valley, Brother Celestin participated in this ancient tradition, adding his own careful measurements to the accumulated wisdom of the ages. Chapter 5: The Zodiacal Journey. The band of constellations through which the sun, moon, and planets make their eternal journey held special significance in medieval astronomy, representing the celestial highway along which all the most important astronomical events unfolded. Brother Celestin turned his attention to this zodiacal pathway, noting how the autumn constellations were now perfectly positioned for detailed observation in the hours before midnight. Aries, the ram, stood high in the southern sky, its modest stars forming the distinctive pattern that marked the beginning of the zodiacal sequence. As the location of the vernal equinox point, where the sun crossed the celestial equator each spring, Aries held a position of supreme importance in medieval astronomical calculations. Brother Celestin carefully measured the positions of the constellation's principal stars, including Hamal and Sheratan, whose Arabic names testified to the Islamic contributions to stellar nomenclature. The concept of the zodiac represented far more than mere star patterns to medieval astronomers. These 12 constellations provided the fundamental coordinate system for measuring celestial positions, with their boundaries defining the celestial longitude that served as the astronomical equivalent of earthly longitude. Each constellation occupied precisely 30 degrees of celestial longitude, creating a standardized framework that could be used for calculations involving any celestial object. Brother Celestin's measurements in Aries required particular precision because of the constellation's role in calendar calculations. The position of the vernal equinox point, while theoretically located within Aries, was slowly shifting westward due to the phenomenon of precession. This gradual drift, amounting to approximately 1 degree every 72 years, meant that the equinox point was slowly moving towards the constellation Pisces, a shift that would have profound implications for future calendar reform. Taurus, the bull, dominated the eastern portion of the zodiacal band, with its bright stars and distinctive V-shaped pattern marking the creature's face. The brilliant orange star Aldebaran, whose Arabic name meant the follower, appeared to be part of the V-shaped cluster, but was actually much closer to Earth than the background stars. Brother Celestin noted this apparent association while recording the star's precise position, unaware of the three-dimensional relationships that would only be understood by later generations of astronomers. The Pleiades cluster, nestled within Taurus, presented one of the most beautiful sights in the night sky. Brother Celestin could distinguish 7 individual stars within the group on exceptionally clear nights, though he had noted that atmospheric conditions affected the visibility of the fainter members. Medieval astronomical texts refer to this cluster as the Seven Sisters, preserving the Greek mythological tradition, while acknowledging that keen-eyed observers could sometimes detect additional members. Gemini, the twins, hosted Mars during this October night, providing an excellent opportunity to study how planetary motion appeared against a rich stellar background. The constellation's 2 bright stars, Castor and Pollux, served as convenient reference points for measuring the red planet's position with maximum accuracy. Brother Celestin noted how Mars's distinctive color made it immediately distinguishable from the bluish-white stellar background, a characteristic that had earned the planet its association with the war god in ancient mythology. The zodiacal constellations visible during autumn nights told the story of humanity's eternal relationship with the sky. These star patterns had been recognized and named by countless generations of observers, their significance extending far beyond pure astronomy to include agriculture, navigation, and the measurement of time itself. Farmers consulted the rising and setting of zodiacal constellations to determine proper planting seasons, while travelers used their positions to maintain direction during night journeys. Brother Celestin's work on zodiacal astronomy contributed to the monastery's broader project of calendar reform. The Julian calendar, established by Julius Caesar, had accumulated significant errors over the centuries due to its slight overestimate of the year's length. The discrepancy between calendar dates and astronomical events, most notably the date of the spring equinox, was gradually becoming apparent to careful observers like Brother Celestin, whose precise measurements provided the data necessary for eventual calendar correction. The ecliptic, the apparent path of the sun through the zodiacal constellations, represented one of the most fundamental concepts in medieval astronomy. This great circle on the celestial sphere, inclined at an angle of approximately 23½ degrees to the celestial equator, defined the plane of Earth's orbit around the sun, though medieval astronomers conceived of it as the sun's path around a stationary Earth. The moon and planets all followed paths that remained close to the ecliptic, making the zodiacal region the theater for virtually all important celestial phenomena. Cancer, though consisting of relatively faint stars, held special significance as the location of the summer solstice point. Brother Celestin had observed the sun pass through this constellation during the previous summer, noting how its position at the solstice marked the longest day of the year for observers in the northern hemisphere. The constellation's association with the crab, a creature that moves sideways, symbolically represented the sun's apparent pause and reversal of direction that occurred at the summer solstice. Leo, the lion, would become visible in the early morning hours, its distinctive sickle-shaped pattern representing one of the most easily recognized zodiacal constellations. Brother Celestin often observed Leo during his pre-dawn measurements, noting how the bright star Regulus marked the heart of the celestial lion. This star, whose Latin name meant Little King, was known to Arabic astronomers as Qalb al-Asad, the heart of the lion, demonstrating the remarkable consistency of stellar associations across different cultures and languages. The slow progression of the equinoxes through the zodiacal constellations, the precession cycle that required approximately 26,000 years to complete, represented one of the most profound discoveries of ancient astronomy. Brother Celestin understood this phenomenon primarily through the writings of Ptolemy, who had quantified the rate of precession based on comparisons between his own observations and those of earlier astronomers. The implications of this discovery for chronology and calendar keeping continued to challenge medieval scholars who sought to reconcile astronomical observation with historical records. Virgo, containing the bright star Spica, would mark the location of the autumnal equinox in future centuries as the equinox point continued its slow westward migration. Brother Celestin's careful measurements of stellar positions in this region contributed to the growing body of observational data that would eventually enable more precise calculations of the precession rate and its effects on calendar accuracy. As the zodiacal constellations continued their nightly westward progression, Brother Celestin completed his systematic survey of their principal stars. Each measurement added to the monastery's comprehensive star catalogue, while his observations of planetary positions within the zodiacal framework contributed to the broader understanding of celestial mechanics that characterized the medieval astronomical renaissance. The work represented both preservation of ancient wisdom and the gradual accumulation of new knowledge that would eventually revolutionize humanity's understanding of the cosmos. Chapter 6. The River of Light. In the depths of the autumn night, when Brother Celestin's eyes had fully adapted to the darkness and the last traces of atmospheric twilight had completely faded, the most magnificent sight in the heavens revealed itself in all its glory. Stretching from the northeastern horizon to the southwest, a faint river of light meandered through the star fields like a celestial highway paved with countless distant suns. The common folk knew this luminous band by many names. Some called it the Pilgrim's Path, believing it marked the route that souls traveled on their journey to paradise. Others referred to it as Watling Street, after the great Roman road that had once connected the far corners of Britain. To the learned astronomers of antiquity, it was the Milky Way, a term that Brother Celestin preferred for its classical dignity and poetic beauty. Through his astrolabe and careful naked eye observation, Brother Celestin mapped the course of this celestial river as it wound its way between the constellations. In Cygnus, it appeared at its brightest and most complex, with dark rifts and channels, creating an intricate pattern that resembled a great tree with spreading branches. Moving southward, the Milky Way passed through Aquila, the eagle, where it narrowed and intensified, creating some of the most spectacular star fields visible to the medieval observer. The true nature of this phenomenon remained one of astronomy's great mysteries. Ancient philosophers had proposed various explanations. Aristotle suggested it might be a form of atmospheric phenomenon, while others theorized that it consisted of extremely distant stars, too faint to be seen individually. Brother Celestin, lacking the telescopic tools that would eventually resolve the question, could only record his careful observations of its structure and seasonal changes, contributing to the accumulation of data that future generations would need to understand its true nature. Using his cross staff to measure angular distances, Brother Celestin noted how the Milky Way's apparent width varied along its length. In some regions, particularly near the constellation Sagittarius, which lay below the horizon during these autumn nights, the band appeared nearly 10 degrees wide and contained complex structures of light and shadow. In other areas, especially towards the constellation Perseus in the northeast, it narrowed to a more modest stream of faint starlight. The darkness rifts that divided the Milky Way into parallel streams caught Brother Celestin's particular attention. These dark channels, most prominent in the Cygnus region, appeared completely devoid of stars and created a striking contrast with the surrounding luminous areas. Medieval astronomers had no way of understanding that these dark lanes were actually caused by interstellar dust clouds blocking the light of more distant stars. To Brother Celestin, they simply represented gaps in the celestial architecture, perhaps serving some unknown purpose. in the divine plan. Within the broader stream of the Milky Way, Brother Celestin could distinguish numerous cloudy stars, nebulous objects that appeared as fuzzy patches of light rather than sharp stellar points. The most prominent of these, located in the constellation Perseus, was bright enough to be visible even in moonlight and had been noted by several Islamic astronomers in their star catalogues. Brother Celestin carefully recorded the positions of these mysterious objects, noting their apparent sizes and relative brightness compared to nearby stars. The Andromeda Nebula, though not recognized as a separate galaxy in medieval times, appeared as a faint oval patch in the constellation of the same name. Brother Celestin could just detect this object on the clearest nights, noting it as a nebulous star of the sixth magnitude in his observing logs. The object's consistent appearance and position distinguished it from comets, which moved perceptibly against the stellar background, but its true nature remained completely mysterious to medieval observers. As Brother Celestin traced the Milky Way's course across the sky, he reflected on the profound questions it raised about the structure of creation. If this band truly consisted of countless distant stars, as some philosophers suggested, then the universe must be far larger and more complex than commonly imagined. The implications challenged the comfortable geocentric model that placed Earth at the center of a relatively compact cosmos, suggesting instead a hierarchy of scale that stretched human understanding to its limits. The seasonal changes in the Milky Way's appearance provided another source of fascination. During summer evenings, the galactic center region in Sagittarius presented the most spectacular display, with dense star clouds and complex structures creating a tapestry of light that dominated the southern sky. Now, in autumn, the anti-center region toward Auriga and Gemini offered a different perspective, still beautiful, but more subdued and uniform in its distribution of faint starlight. Brother Celestin's observations of the Milky Way contributed to broader questions about the nature of the celestial sphere itself. If the fixed stars were truly fixed to a solid crystalline sphere, as Aristotelian cosmology maintained, then the Milky Way's irregular structure suggested complexities in that sphere's construction that were difficult to explain. Alternative models, such as those proposed by some Islamic astronomers, allowed for multiple stellar distances. But these ideas had not yet gained wide acceptance in Christian Europe. The work of mapping the Milky Way required exceptional observing conditions and considerable patience. On nights when atmospheric haze or high cirrus clouds dimmed the fainter stars, the celestial river became nearly invisible, leaving only the brightest stellar landmarks to mark its course. Brother Celestin learned to recognize these subtle changes in atmospheric transparency, adjusting his observing schedule to take advantage of the clearest possible conditions. Meteors occasionally streaked through the Milky Way's star fields, their brief trails of light creating momentary additions to the celestial display. Brother Celestin carefully distinguished between these atmospheric phenomena and the permanent features of the night sky, noting the meteor's apparent paths and speeds in a separate section of his observing log. The medieval understanding of meteors as atmospheric exhalations burning in the upper air was consistent with Aristotelian natural philosophy, though careful observers like Brother Celestin noted details that would eventually contribute to more accurate theories. The intersection of the Milky Way with various constellations created distinctive seasonal landmarks that aided in celestial navigation and timekeeping. When the galactic band passed through Cygnus and stood high overhead at midnight, experienced observers knew that autumn had truly arrived. When it stretched from Cassiopeia to Sagittarius across the entire sky, summer was at its height. These relationships between galactic position and terrestrial seasons provided an additional cosmic clock that complemented the more familiar cycles of sun, moon, and planets. As the night progressed and Earth's rotation carried the observatory through its measured arc, the Milky Way appeared to shift westward like all other celestial objects. Stars that had been rising in the northeast when Brother Celestin began his observations were now climbing toward their highest points, while the western portions of the galactic stream were beginning their descent toward the horizon. This eternal rotation, proceeding with clockwork precision, provided tangible evidence of the cosmic order that governed all celestial motions. The contemplation of the Milky Way's vast scale and mysterious nature often led Brother Celestin to reflect on humanity's place within creation. If this band of light truly represented countless distant stars, each potentially accompanied by its own retinue of planets and moons, then the universe contained wonders beyond human comprehension. Yet the mathematical regularity of celestial motions and the ability of human reason to understand and predict astronomical phenomena suggested that the cosmos, however vast, operated according to rational principles accessible to careful study. Chapter 7. The Deep Night Hours. As the monastery's bells chimed matins, the night office that divided the darkness into its deepest and most contemplative hours, Brother Celestin reached the peak of his nightly observational work. This was the time when the sky revealed its most subtle treasures: faint stars invisible during twilight, delicate color variations among stellar types, and the complex structures within familiar constellations that only became apparent under the darkest conditions. The absence of any artificial light sources beyond the monastery's walls created observing conditions that modern astronomers could only dream of achieving. No glow from distant cities contaminated the horizon. No electric lights washed out the fainter stars. In this pristine darkness, Brother Celestin could detect stars as faint as the sixth magnitude, the theoretical limit of naked eye visibility, and distinguish subtle details in the Milky Way's structure that required exceptional sky quality to observe. Working systematically through the constellation Cassiopeia, Brother Celestin mapped the positions of stars too faint to appear in existing catalogues. These modest suns, while individually unremarkable, played important roles in defining constellation boundaries and providing reference points for measuring the positions of brighter objects. Each measurement required careful attention to detail, as errors in recording faint star positions could accumulate into significant systematic problems in the final catalogue. The distinctive W shape of Cassiopeia provided an ideal testing ground for observational accuracy. The constellation's 5 main stars created a simple geometric figure whose proportions could be measured with high precision, while the surrounding field contained numerous fainter stars that challenged the observer's ability to distinguish real stellar objects from atmospheric effects or instrumental artifacts. Brother Celestin had learned, through experience, to distinguish between genuine faint stars and the optical illusions that could mislead even experienced observers. Color perception reached its peak sensitivity during these deep night hours, when Brother Celestin's eyes had achieved maximum dark adaptation. Stars that appeared simply white or yellow during twilight now revealed subtle tints of blue, orange, and red that provided clues to their fundamental nature. While medieval astronomy lacked the theoretical framework to understand stellar colors in terms of temperature and composition, careful observers like Brother Celestin recorded these variations as potentially significant characteristics that might someday yield deeper insights. The double star Albireo, located in the head of Cygnus the Swan, presented a particularly striking example of stellar color contrast. Through careful observation, Brother Celestin could distinguish the golden primary star from its fainter blue companion, a feat that required excellent atmospheric conditions and perfect dark adaptation. He recorded this observation as a close double star with contrasting colors, not knowing that he was observing two suns with dramatically different surface temperatures, orbiting their common center of gravity. Variable stars, those whose brightness changed over periods of days, weeks, or months, required systematic monitoring over extended periods to reveal their true nature. Brother Celestin maintained careful records of several stars, whose brightness he had noted varied from previous observations. The star Mira in the constellation Cetus provided the most dramatic example of stellar variability, disappearing entirely for months at a time before gradually returning to naked eye visibility. These brightness variations posed significant challenges for medieval astronomical theory, which assumed that celestial objects were perfect and unchanging. Brother Celestin approached variable stars with particular care, making multiple observations over several nights to confirm apparent brightness changes before recording them as genuine phenomena. The discovery that stars could fade and brighten challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of the celestial sphere and suggested that the heavens might be more dynamic than previously imagined. The technique of stellar photometry, estimating star brightness by comparison with nearby reference stars, required considerable skill and experience to execute accurately. Brother Celestin had developed his own magnitude scale based on careful comparison of hundreds of stars, creating a system that allowed him to estimate brightness changes to within about 1/4 magnitude. This precision, while modest by modern standards, represented remarkable accuracy for naked eye observations. Star clusters presented some of the most challenging observational targets for the medieval astronomer. The Pleiades cluster, with its compact group of bright blue stars, could be resolved into individual components under excellent conditions, while more distant clusters appeared as nebulous patches that resisted resolution into separate stars. Brother Celestin carefully mapped the structure of visible clusters, noting the number of stars that could be distinguished and their overall distribution pattern. The Perseus double cluster, visible as a pair of hazy patches in the constellation's star-rich region, challenged the limits of naked eye observation. On the clearest nights, Brother Celestin could detect a granular structure within these nebulous areas, suggesting that they might consist of numerous faint stars too close together to be resolved individually. These observations contributed to growing evidence that some nebulous stars might actually be distant stellar aggregations rather than single objects. As Earth continued its rotation, carrying the observatory through the night hours, the western sky began to show the first signs of the approaching dawn. Bright stars that had dominated the evening hours were now setting behind the monastery's walls, while new constellations rose in the east to take their places. This eternal procession, as regular and predictable as any mechanical clock, provided a constant reminder of the cosmic order that governed all celestial motions. The temperature had dropped steadily throughout the night, requiring Brother Celestin to warm his hands periodically over the oil lamp flame to maintain the dexterity needed for precise instrumental work. The cold affected his brass instruments as well, causing small changes in their dimensions that required periodic recalibration against known reference stars. These practical concerns of observational astronomy were rarely mentioned in theoretical treatises, but formed an essential part of the observer's craft. Atmospheric phenomena added their own complexities to deep night observations. Occasional aurora displays, though rare at the monastery's latitude, created spectacular curtains of colored light that could interfere with faint star observations. More commonly, the zodiacal light, a faint glow extending along the ecliptic from the western horizon after sunset, provided evidence for interplanetary matter that medieval astronomers could observe but not fully explain. The monastery's location in the Loire Valley provided generally excellent observing conditions, with clear skies prevailing for much of the year and minimal atmospheric turbulence. Brother Celestin had learned to recognize the subtle signs that indicated exceptional transparency, the visibility of extremely faint stars, the sharp definition of constellation patterns, and the clarity of the Milky Way's fine structure. On such nights, he could push his observations to their absolute limits, detecting stellar details that remained hidden under normal conditions. Chapter 8. Dawn's Gentle Approach. As Brother Celestin completed his measurements of the last few stars visible in the darkening eastern sky, the first subtle signs of approaching dawn began to appear. The process was gradual and almost imperceptible at first. A slight lessening of the darkness near the horizon, a barely detectable dimming of the faintest stars. After spending the entire night in perfect darkness, his eyes had become exquisitely sensitive to even the smallest changes in sky brightness. The eastern horizon, where the sun would eventually make its appearance, showed the earliest hints of astronomical twilight as scattered molecules in Earth's atmosphere began to catch and scatter the light of the still hidden sun. This phenomenon, occurring when the sun reached 18 degrees below the horizon, marked the beginning of the end for serious stellar observation. Brother Celestin noted the exact time using the monastery's water clock, adding this data to his records of twilight phenomena that helped establish precise sunrise and sunset calculations. Working quickly now against the brightening sky, Brother Celestin completed his final positional measurements of the morning stars. Venus, having set hours earlier, was no longer visible, but Jupiter dominated the eastern sky with steady, brilliant light that would remain visible well into the dawn hours. The giant planet's position in the constellation Pisces provided an excellent opportunity for one last precise measurement before increasing sky brightness made accurate stellar coordinates impossible to determine. The gradual transformation of the night sky during astronomical dawn provided a natural demonstration of stellar magnitude relationships that was impossible to observe under any other circumstances. As the sky slowly brightened, stars disappeared in strict order of their apparent brightness. The faintest sixth magnitude stars vanished first, followed by progressively brighter objects. until only the most brilliant stars and planets remained visible against the pale blue of approaching daylight. Brother Celestin carefully recorded the sequence of stellar disappearance, noting which stars remained visible at each stage of the dawn process. This information proved valuable for understanding the true brightness relationships among stars and for calibrating the magnitude scale that formed the foundation of stellar photometry. The data also helped establish standardized definitions for the various phases of twilight that were essential for accurate calendar calculations. The monastery began to stir as the community prepared for Lauds, the dawn prayer that would welcome the new day. Brother Celestin could hear the soft footsteps of his fellow monks moving through the corridors below, their quiet voices joining in the first prayers of the morning office. The bells that had marked the canonical hours throughout the night would soon ring again, calling the community to gather for the celebration of daybreak. As nautical twilight began, marked by the sun reaching 12 degrees below the horizon, the eastern sky took on a deep blue hue that gradually intensified and spread westward. Individual stars became increasingly difficult to distinguish against this brightening background, and Brother Celestin began the careful process of securing his instruments and organizing the night's observational records. The astrolabe, which had served as his primary measuring tool throughout the long hours of darkness, was cleaned and wrapped in its protective cloth before being returned to its wooden case. Each instrument received the same careful attention. The quadrant was checked for damage and stored in its padded container, while the cross staff and other measuring devices were cleaned and arranged in their designated places within the observatory's storage cabinets. Brother Celestin's observational logs, pages of careful measurements, calculations, and notes written in his precise hand, represented the night's most valuable scientific harvest. These records would join the monastery's growing archive of astronomical data, contributing to the long-term projects of star catalog compilation and planetary motion analysis that occupied multiple generations of scholarly observers. Each page contained dozens of individual measurements, cross-references to previous observations, and marginal notes that would help future researchers interpret and verify the recorded data. The parchment pages were carefully blotted to ensure that the ink had dried completely, then rolled and tied with silk ribbons to protect them during storage. Brother Celestin maintained meticulous filing systems that allowed quick retrieval of any specific observation from years of accumulated data. Cross-indexes organized by constellation, date, and type of observation ensured that the information remained accessible to other scholars who might need to consult specific measurements. As civil twilight approached, the final phase before sunrise itself, the eastern horizon began to show the warm colors that announced the sun's imminent appearance. Deep purples and magentas gave way to brilliant oranges and golds as the atmosphere scattered increasing amounts of solar radiation. This daily spectacle, while beautiful, marked the definitive end of useful astronomical observation until the cycle began anew with the following evening's twilight. The last few bright stars gradually faded into invisibility as the sky continued to brighten. Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, held on longest against the growing dawn, its brilliant blue-white light finally succumbing to the sun's overwhelming radiance only minutes before the solar disk itself appeared above the eastern hills. Brother Celestin made a final note of the exact time when the last star disappeared, completing his record of the dawn sequence. With his instruments safely stored and his observational records completed, Brother Celestin took a moment to survey the transformed landscape spread out below the tower. The Loire Valley, which had been invisible in the darkness hours earlier, now emerged in the growing light as a patchwork of fields, villages, and forest groves. Smoke began to rise from cottage chimneys as the rural population started their daily labors, creating a gentle haze that would affect atmospheric transparency for astronomical observations during the coming night. The monastery itself appeared different in the pale light of early morning. Walls and buildings that had been mere shadows during the night now showed their true proportions and architectural details. The garden plots where the brothers grew herbs and vegetables for the community's use were revealed in neat, orderly rows that reflected the same attention to systematic organization that characterized the astronomical work conducted in the tower above. Brother Celestin descended the stone steps slowly, his legs stiff from hours of standing and crouching over instruments in the cold night air. The familiar routine of climbing down from the observatory provided a gentle transition from the cosmic perspective of stellar observation back to the earthly concerns of monastic life. Each step carried him farther from the realm of infinite space and eternal celestial motions toward the finite human-scaled world of daily prayers, communal meals, and scholarly discourse. The bells of Lauds began to ring as Brother Celestin reached the bottom of the tower stairs, their bronze voices calling the community to praise the creator of the stars and planets, whose motions he had spent the night recording. The transition from astronomical observation to religious devotion felt natural and appropriate. Both activities involved careful attention to divine order and the recognition of humanity's place within a vast, intelligently designed cosmos. Conclusion: The Eternal Dance. As Brother Celestin made his way through the monastery's corridors towards the chapel where his brothers were gathering for morning prayer, he carried with him the satisfaction of another night's work completed in service of humanity's growing understanding of the heavens. The pages of measurements and calculations in his leather satchel represented hours of careful observation, each data point contributing to the great collaborative effort of medieval astronomy to map and comprehend the cosmic order. The bells continued to ring across the peaceful valley, their sound carrying over fields where farmers would soon begin their daily labors, guided by the same celestial rhythms that had governed Brother Celestin's nighttime observations. The sun, whose rising had ended his astronomical work, would begin its own measured journey across the sky, marking the hours with the same mathematical precision that characterized the motions of stars and planets. In the chapel, the community's voices would soon join in prayers of thanksgiving for the night's rest and anticipation for the day's work ahead. Brother Celestin would add his own voice to this chorus, offering gratitude for the clear skies and steady conditions that had allowed productive observations. The same divine intelligence that guided the eternal dance of celestial bodies also watched over the earthly community gathered in worship. The work would continue with the next clear night, when Brother Celestin would once again climb the worn stone steps to his tower observatory. There, surrounded by his carefully maintained instruments and illuminated by the gentle flame of his oil lamp, he would resume his patient dialogue with the stars. Each night brought new measurements to record, new phenomena to investigate, and new contributions to make to humanity's slowly growing comprehension of the universe's grand design. The stars themselves would continue their nightly procession across the dark vault of heaven, carrying forward the eternal dance that had begun at the moment of creation and would continue until the end of time. Brother Celestin's careful measurements captured brief moments in this cosmic ballet, preserving them for future generations who would build upon his work and extend human knowledge ever deeper into the mysteries of the celestial realm. As the morning light grew stronger and the last stars faded into the brightening sky, the monastery settled into the familiar rhythms of another day. But high above the peaceful valley, invisible in the sun's brilliant radiance, the stars continued their ancient dance, waiting patiently for darkness to return and reveal their silent testimony to the order and beauty of God's creation. In 12 hours, Brother Celestin would return to witness their stately procession once more, adding his voice to the eternal conversation between earth and heaven that was the true heart of all astronomical endeavor. The cycle would begin again, as it had for countless nights before, and would for countless nights to come, linking each moment of human observation to the vast, unending story of the cosmos itself. In this way, the work of a single monk in a tower above the Loire Valley became part of something far greater: humanity's patient, persistent effort to understand its place among the stars and to participate consciously in the magnificent dance of creation that surrounded and sustained all life. And so, Brother Celestin joined his brothers in prayer as the sun rose over the monastery, carrying within his memory the quiet wonder of another night spent in communion with the eternal lights of heaven, knowing that when darkness returned, the stars would be waiting to continue their ancient dialogue with any who had eyes to see and hearts to understand.